Part of technology, isn't it? Technology is doing this. And that's why it has the power to entrain us, because we are seeing in it, in these movies, and these dramas, and the scenarios, and the symbolism that's being used, is deeply enigmatic to us, deeply attractive. Now, the whole force of urban industrialism upon our tastes is to convince us that artificiality is not only inevitable, but better, says Theodore Roszak. Researchers on behalf of an independent television commission in the UK and in the United States and the Netherlands are developing immersive television, a new generation television to give the viewer a sense of actually being there in the depicted scene. Right? The TV has become your reality. Remember we talked about the kids especially have been guilty about repressing the inner aggression and anger, which is 9 times out of 10 perfectly healthy. Look what is happening with them trying to process it. You're not allowed to speak it, you're not allowed to process it, you're not allowed to even think about it. Well, you can go out and exterminate as many enemies as you want, and rape as many women as you want, virtually. And many of these games, as the enemy and the rival, is a secret society. The Illuminati, or even an adversary, or some kind of secret society beings, secret cabals, right? Look how that it works. They're even telling the kids, yeah, we're your enemy. Fight us virtually all you want. Commit genocide 20 times a day if you feel like it. It's hours of fun. And this technology, you see, one of the other attractors of it, it does permit you, by all the gadgetry and so on, it permits you to imagine yourself as the highest being in creation. Everything is lesser than you. As in the tarot cards, we have the hermit. He's the technician who stands at the top of his mountain. He's actually in a very weak position. But he looks down, he has a little light, a little lamp, a little light. It's the mental light. That's why it's held at the top of a staff. Staff representing the spine, and the light, the lantern at the top is the cerebral ego light. And it barely, in the Aleister Crowley deck, it barely pierces the darkness. It's a very ineffectual light. It doesn't shine up nature's mysteries. It only shines up a little bit. But that's sufficient to the technician who wishes to probe from his Archimedean point the mysteries of reality with his reason. But he's in the dark. But you don't need to vent your aggression, just keep on repressing it. Have this big Cheshire grin, ascend to happiness, have this big grin on your face. You're a pseudo-self, so we can sell you a pseudo-peace, a pseudo-satisfaction. And the existentially dead person accepts it. You can drink it in a bottle. When we're coming through the airport in Australia, there was this sign on the wall, and it said, "The world belongs to those who see its potential." We had to hustle, so we couldn't take a photograph of it because it had to keep moving, right? The world belongs to those who see its potential. Not the world belongs to those who see their own potential. That's scientism for you. And the malls are like temples. You know, this is one in Manchester, a huge thing, like a Palace of Versailles or whatever, you know, temple, the Aztec temples over here, and the Pizza Hut's like some sort of altar of sacrifice from the... I had to take a piss, I went into the toilets. It's like the Temple of Dendera. You're taking a piss, you get ISIS looking down at you. It's very disconcerting. Very disconcerting. Gerrymander says, our environment itself is the manifestation of the mental processes of other humans. Of all species of the planet and all the cultures of the human species, we 20th century Americans have become the first in history to live predominantly inside projections of our own minds. And the technical term for that was coined by the French philosopher Jean Baudrillard, simulacra. The man who lives in a plastic world ends up becoming just as artificial and plastic as the world he designs for himself. It's also known as hyper-reality. Simple things like, for instance, talking to somebody through a gadget is a form of hyperreality. You talking about a sitcom or TV show as if they're your family or you're involved in the drama is a form of hyperreality. There's many versions of it. Disneyland is a hyperreality. The casinos are a hyperreality. These big extopias, those big incredible... say imagine you're on a yacht in Dubai, one of those yachts, but they have a screen of the yacht that you're on it. That's like that. And so on. Hyperrealities. And when you go into it, the trouble is that you get into the hyperreality and you can't remember what is the real reality because the hyperreality mimics so-called reality, official reality, real reality so precisely that in the end you're befuddled, you're lost in the maze. You can't tell what's the hyperreality and the real reality. And that's what is happening to the kids now. You know, in fact, even the simple act of believing a show on TV, this is being filmed. So these poor suckers who are watching this now on the camera 5, 10, 15 years later, hyper-reality. It isn't now, but you thought it was. Every time we sit and watch a TV show, right, and we think that's in real time, but it's not, if it's not in real time. So hyper-reality is used in semiotics and postmodern philosophy to describe a hypothetical inability of consciousness to distinguish reality from fantasy, especially in technologically advanced postmodern cultures. Hyperreality is a means to characterize the way consciousness defines what is actually real in a world where a multitude of media can radically shape and filter an original event or experience. Jean Baudrillard in particular suggests that the world we live in has been replaced by a copy world where we seek simulated stimuli and nothing more. Many movies, the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie where he goes to Mars, what was that called? Total Recall, yeah. That plays on this, and many others as well. The Matrix, yeah. Connecting people. Friends, I got lots of friends. Friends, not friends now. Some bugger emails me he's a friend. I thought friend meant something else. I guess I was completely wrong. From the dawn of civilization onwards, crowds have always undergone the influence of illusions. It is to the creators of illusions that they have raised more temples, statues, and altars than any other class of men, says Gustave Le Bon. Eric Fromm says that what has happened in modern industrial society is that traditions and common values and genuine social personal ties with others have largely disappeared. The modern mass man is isolated and lonely, even though he's part of a crowd. He has no convictions which he would share with others, only slogans and ideologies he gets from the communications media. In other words, the immersion has been successful. Fromm says, in the cybernetic age, the individual becomes increasingly subject to manipulation. His work, his consumption, and his leisure are manipulated by advertising, by ideologies, by what Skinner calls positive reinforcements. Right? You become a machine, you'll be treated like one. The individual loses his active, responsible role in the social process. He becomes completely adjusted and learns that any behavior, act, thought, or feeling which does not fit into the general scheme puts him at a severe disadvantage. In fact, he is what he is supposed to be. A couple more in this section here. From saying that another feature of the cybernetic man, his tendency to behave in a routinized, stereotyped, and unspontaneous manner, is to be found in a more drastic form in many schizophrenic obsessional stereotypes. So we're already starting off with a kind of schizophrenia. They're making it worse. I've even mentioned many times that the whole culture of physical health, the work machines, you know, the weightlifting machines and all of that gadgetry is so mechanical for a purpose to give you this routinized idea of your own body. A very mechanical, armored idea of health. But as I said before, we're halfway there. Our domestic roles, we're so immersed in them. We're hurrying to our graves as if we're eager to get to them. And then we get a break with a life of servitude to the clock. We're hail the masters for the recreation. Right? We've sacrificed vocation, and we have accepted a little bit of recreation to sell our souls for it, to break the monotony. And that recreation is approved as well. And Gerrymander says, it has only been 2 generations since artificial light became so widespread that we moved into artificially lighted environments. Now, most of the light we ingest through our skin and eyes is artificial. We are starved for some natural light spectra, and we have overdosed on those spectra that come from artificial light, incandescent, fluorescent, mercury, vapor, sodium, television, and others. Indeed, about 90% of the total emission of an incandescent lamp lies in the infrared. The global village will even be worse. You know, I'm waiting until the day where they're going to patent the rain. In Australia, if it rains, they say, look, it's got a stamp, Aussie rain. Hands off. For an eco-psychology, nothing serves as a more telling symptom of our collective state of soul than this urban habitat, which has bounced on the edge of psychopathology since its beginning. The industrial city might seem as the collective body armor of our culture, a pathological effort to distance us from close contact with the natural continuum from which we evolve. And we want it, because each person who's infected with that antipathy to nature, albeit non-conscious, is in some sense leaning towards this and may have no choice. Erich Fromm brilliantly says that death is no longer symbolically expressed by unpleasant-smelling feces or corpses, you know, the necrophilia. Its symbols of the necrophilia are now clean, shining machines. We're in one. And the reality behind this antiseptic facade becomes increasingly visible. Man, in the name of progress, is transforming the world into a stinking and poisonous place. He pollutes the air, the water, the soil, the animals, and himself. And he's doing this to a degree that has made it doubtful whether the earth will still be livable within 100 years from now. One of the other terms, as we said, is governmentality. We'll look at paternalism. That's another word to look up. Corporatocracy. And in the solution section, we're going to look at another classic one, very important word, adultism. Adultism. One of the boss hogs and senior brainchilds behind all this nonsense, Dr. Jose Delgado, psychopath extraordinaire, he says, we need a program of psychosurgery for political control of our society. The purpose is the physical control of the mind. Everyone who deviates from the given norm can be surgically mutilated. The individual may think that he is the most important reality is his own existence, but this is only his personal point of view. So much for your individualism. This lacks historical perspective. Man does not have the right to develop his own mind. This kind of liberal orientation has great appeal. We must electronically control the brain. Someday armies and generals will be controlled by electronic stimulation of the brain. Fromm says that behaviorist theory does not interest itself in the subjective forces which drive man or to behave in a certain way. It is not concerned with what he feels, but only with how he behaves, and in the social conditioning that shapes his behavior. And why not? If we're all on strings, if we remain infantile, they're almost right. Thomas Hobbes, important person to know, was one of the architects of this kind of thinking. Human activities, human beings are physical objects, is the Hobbesian point of view. According to sophisticated machines, all of whose functions and activities can be described and explained in purely mechanistic terms. Even thought itself, therefore, must be understood as an instance of the physical operation of the human body, right? The physicalist. Sensation, for example, involves a series of mechanical processes operating within the human nervous system by means of which the sensible features of material things produce ideas in the brain of the human beings who perceive them. I mean, it's just beyond belief. Describing a human being in terms of a machine. The high priests of physicalism. And then this great intellect goes on to say that the state of peace among men living side by side is not the natural state. The natural state is one of war. Remember we were talking about the pathology of people in a total state of psychic deremption? And as I said, everything they touch turns to discords. Well, this priceless piece of wisdom that this guy's just given us is his consciousness. How can a man who's at peace within make a statement like that? Thomas Hobbes and the favored technique of the time. Or Thomas Hobbes used the favored technique of the time, pure reason, to try and deduce the origins of the social and political structures that held the world together. He made the case that in the state of nature, man was governed by nothing but his own appetites and aversions and was free to do anything to get what he wanted, including murdering his neighbor. In short, humanity lived in a benighted state of war. For humankind to escape from the homicidal pursuit of self-interest that was our natural inclination, social regulation had to be imposed from on high by a sovereign. You think that was written in the 1700s? We got the modern thing walking loose today. Daniel C. Dennett, so-called professor. The individual cells that compose you are alive, but we now understand life well enough to appreciate that each cell is a mindless mechanism, a largely autonomous micro-robot no more conscious than a yeast cell. Until fairly recently, this idea of a rather magical extra ingredient was the only candidate for an explanation of consciousness that even seemed to make sense. For many people, this idea, dualism, is still the only vision of consciousness that makes any sense to them. But there is now widespread agreement among them, scientists and philosophers, that dualism must be simply false. We are each made of mindless robots and nothing else. He's talking about himself. No non-physical, non-robotic ingredients at all. These are the masters of deception, the paid high priests of the global village. They'll go to any lengths, you see, to do this. As I said, the machines. Cybernetic man is so alienated that he experiences his body as an instrument for success. If you're against nature, you're against the self. So his body now must look youthful and healthy. It is experienced narcissistically as the most precious asset on the personality market. And the media is constantly selling this mechanistic ideology. Remember, human rather than being. We fall for it. And as I say, give them a chance. They're going to sell us the aging idea. Well, wait a minute, what comes with that? Immortality? Do you realize that that's completely unsustainable? If an emotional being was to live for maybe more than 100 years and it was immortal, they would die. Because your emotions don't allow you to live very long. Because conscience is painful. And an immortal man, like they show in The Day the Earth Stood Still or whatever, could not live that long with the pain and suffering of really existing. Because the pain of conscience, and the Highlander movie, seeing the deaths and the world, even the philosophical, the angst that you see, is crushing to the human spirit. You couldn't live much longer. So when they're selling you an idea of immortality, they're selling it to a non-human. As we said in the beginning, a being that doesn't exist, purely human, no being. A conscienceless being is the only one that can be a god or an immortal.